Hi, my name is Marianne Clark. I never imagined that one Christmas Eve would break me open and rebuild my life from ashes. On the porch of my parents' farmhouse in northern Montana, I held a bleeding man in my arms and begged them for help. But instead of compassion, they slammed the door on me. My mother's voice cut sharper than the winter wind. "You've always chosen strangers over your own family." And just like that, my children and I were cast out into the snow. Before I tell you the rest, let me ask, have you ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you? If you have, then you'll understand what I felt that night. Inside the house, the air smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, but it carried no warmth. My father sat sunk into his recliner, socks half off, glasses sliding down his nose, eyes glued to the evening news about a 20-car pileup on I-90. The Christmas tree blinked in the corner, lights flickering like they were trying too hard to hide the chill that lived in those walls. My mother circled the dining table, arms folded like a judge at a contest she didn't want to attend. She glanced at the turkey I'd roasted and muttered, "Dry. Not everyone's cut out to be a wife." Her words sliced across the silence. I stayed quiet, scooping mashed potatoes onto plates, trying not to let my hands shake. My children, David, 8, and Emily, 6, sat on the couch, staring at the lights like they were pretending to be anywhere but here. My mother wasn't done. "You're 36, Marianne, not 16. You can't just drag your kids back here every time life gets hard. You had a house in Dallas. Weren't there shelters?" I forced myself to look at her. "Mom, he didn't leave us." "He died." My voice cracked, but she didn't flinch. Her lip curled the way it always did when emotion entered a conversation. "Death happens to everyone. Doesn't mean the world owes you a place to live." The words lodged like glass in my chest. I wanted to scream, but all I managed was silence. Then came the knock. Not polite, not hesitant. A pounding that rattled the front door. We all froze. Bang. Again, louder this time. I set the spoon down and rushed to the entryway. My children followed, but I stopped them with an arm. "Stay behind me." When I opened the door, a blast of icy wind hit my face. A man staggered on the porch, snow clinging to his shoulders. Blood streaked down his temple, soaking into the torn collar of his coat. His skin was pale, lips trembling. He collapsed forward straight into the snow at my feet. David gasped. Emily clung to my leg. I dropped to my knees, cradling his shoulders. His body was ice cold. "Sir?" "Stay with me. What on earth are you doing?" My mother's voice snapped behind me. I turned to see her standing at the threshold, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "He's hurt. He needs help. You don't know him. He could be drunk, dangerous. We're not taking in strays on Christmas." My father appeared beside her, mug in hand. "Call the cops. Let them deal with it. We can't just leave him here," I shouted, my voice breaking. "Think about your children," my mother hissed. "You've always been blind, picking broken things over blood." That was it. The words I'd heard all my life. Words that once shamed me, now only fueled me. I stood slowly, my breath sharp in the frozen air. I turned to my kids. "Get your coats." Emily blinked. "Are we leaving?" "Yes," I said firmly. "We are." My mother's jaw dropped. "Are you out of your mind?" "Maybe," I replied, "but at least I still have one." I grabbed the old wool blanket from the bench, the last thing my husband had given me before he died, and wrapped it tight around my children. My phone battery was nearly dead, but I dialed 911 and gave them the address. Then I turned back toward my parents. My father muttered, "You'll regret this." My mother didn't say a word. She simply shut the door. Not a slam, just quiet, final. Snow blinded the windshield as I half dragged, half carried the man into my car. David and Emily huddled together in the back seat, holding hands. The man groaned once, then went still. As I pulled away from the house, tears burned my eyes. I wasn't crying from fear, Not even from anger. It was something else. Something I couldn't name yet. What I did know was simple. I had lost a family that night. But maybe, just maybe, I had saved one too. The drive through the storm felt endless. My wipers screeched against the windshield, smearing more snow than they cleared. My hands shook on the wheel, not from the cold, but from fear. The stranger slumped against the passenger seat, his head tilted, blood dripping slowly down his cheek. What if I'm wrong? What if he doesn't make it? Emily's small voice came from the back seat. "Mom, is he gonna die?" I swallowed hard. No, baby. Not if we get there in time, but I wasn't sure. When the glowing red emergency sign finally appeared through the curtain of snow, relief nearly buckled my knees. I pulled up to the sliding doors and honked. Nurses rushed out with a stretcher. They lifted the man with practiced urgency, calling out his vitals. I stumbled after them, clutching my children's hands. Snow clung to my boots as we entered the blinding fluorescent light of the ER. A nurse turned to me. "Name?" I froze. I don't know. He collapsed on my porch. She raised her brows but kept moving, guiding him into a trauma room. As they cut away his coat, something slipped from his pocket and hit the floor. A black leather wallet. I picked it up without thinking. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was an ID. The name stared back at me like a shout. Ethan Carter. The name was familiar, too familiar. I remembered my father years ago ranting at the dinner table. The Carters don't care who they trample. Land, money, politics. They'll ruin anyone who gets in their way. My husband, God rest his soul, used to shake his head at the evening news whenever a Carter ranch scandal came up. That family has skeletons buried in every field from here to Wyoming. And now, one of them was lying unconscious on my porch, and in my car, and in this hospital. I stuffed the wallet into my coat pocket, my heart pounding. The waiting room was nearly empty. A receptionist handed me a clipboard. "We need an incident report, ma'am." I sat with the kids on a plastic bench. I wrapped them in the old wool blanket, the one that still faintly carried my husband's scent. They leaned against me, their eyelids drooping, exhaustion winning over fear. I filled in the form with shaking hands, leaving half the blanks empty. When they finally drifted to sleep, I pulled out my phone. Only 14% battery left. I typed Ethan Carter into Google. Within seconds, headlines filled the screen. Carter heir missing amid federal investigation. Whistleblower vanishes after linking ranch to land fraud. Millions funneled through shell companies tied to Carter family. My stomach dropped. I looked at my children curled beside me, innocent and warm under the blanket, and felt ice crawl up my spine. What had I brought into our lives tonight? The phone buzzed in my hand, a message from my mother. Just 4 words, "Stay gone." We changed the locks. "No, are you safe?" "No, are the kids warm?" Just rejection, carved in text. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I flipped the phone face down on the armrest. "Mommy!" Emily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "I'm hungry." I forced a smile. "We'll find something, sweetheart." The only food I could get was from a vending machine in the hallway. 2 granola bars and a bottle of water. We sat quietly while the kids chewed, their small hands clutching the wrappers. Then a doctor approached. He looked worn down, dark circles under his eyes, voice low and even. "You brought in the man from the snow?" "Yes," I said quickly, standing. "How is he?" "He coded once on the table, but he's stable now." Relief washed through me so hard I almost fell back into the chair. But then the doctor closed the chart in his hands, his tone changing. We had to get special clearance to continue treatment. "He's flagged in the system. Federal priority." The word federal snapped me upright. "What does that mean?" "I can't say more," he answered carefully. "But you should know. Security may contact you." Since you were the one who brought him in, I nodded, too stunned to speak. When he walked away, I felt the ground shift under me. Federal security. My children were asleep against my side, their breath soft and steady, while the world outside my little circle spun into chaos. Who was Ethan Carter, really? And why had fate placed him on my parents' porch, on this night of all nights? I stepped outside the ER for air. The snow had eased, but the cold cut to the bone. I wrapped my coat tighter and leaned against the wall, staring at the night sky. That's when I saw them. 2 men stood near the ICU doors inside. Not doctors, not nurses. Suits under heavy coats. Their posture military straight, eyes sharp. One stepped forward as soon as he spotted me. "You're the one who brought him in?" I nodded cautiously. He flashed a badge. Not local police, not FBI, Department of the Interior. His voice was calm, but it carried steel. "We need to talk." Now the agent in the black overcoat motioned for me to follow him. His partner, broader, quieter, kept a step behind, his eyes never leaving me. My pulse hammered as they led me down the hall, past the vending machines, into a small consultation room. Inside were 2 plastic chairs and a metal table bolted to the floor. The taller agent gestured for me to sit. I lowered myself onto the cold chair, clutching my coat around me like armor. He opened a thin leather folder but didn't glance down. His eyes locked on mine. "Name?" "Marianne Clark." "You brought the man in?" "Yes. I found him outside my parents' house. He collapsed on the porch. Did he say anything to you? About where he came from? About who hurt him?" I shook my head. "No, he was barely conscious. He groaned once. Maybe tried to speak, but it wasn't words." The 2 men exchanged a quick look. Not surprise, recognition. The taller one leaned forward. "Mrs. Clark, you may have stepped into something far larger than you realize. For your safety and your children's, it is in your best interest to keep this night to yourself." The words slid across the table, velvet smooth but edged with wire. My palms dampened. "What do you mean, keep it to myself?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the folder and stood. The quiet one nodded once, and they both left the room without another word. I sat frozen for a moment, my heart thudding against my ribs. Keep it to myself. That wasn't advice. That was a warning. When I returned to the waiting room, David and Emily were curled up on the bench, heads resting together, asleep beneath the wool blanket. Their innocence in that moment nearly broke me. I sat beside them, staring at the hospital's sterile walls, but my mind wouldn't quiet. Why me? Why my porch? And why had those agents looked at me like I wasn't just a bystander, but a piece on their chessboard? My phone buzzed again. A new message. This time not from my mother. Unknown number. "You brought him in. That makes you a liability or an asset. Depends on what you do next." My breath caught. I read the words again, my hands trembling. No signature. No instructions. Just a threat or an invitation. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned the screen face down and pressed my hands over my children, pulling them closer. By dawn, the hospital released me with no answers. Ethan Carter remained in ICU under guard. I signed a few papers, then left with the kids, stepping into a world that suddenly felt sharper, more dangerous. The only motel I could afford was 15 minutes outside town, tucked behind a gas station. The neon vacancy sign flickered like it was tired of its own glow. Inside, the carpet smelled of mildew, but the heater worked and the door locked. That was enough. I tucked the children into the stiff motel bed, pulled the blanket up to their chins, and sat at the cracked wooden desk with my phone. Sleep wouldn't come. Not with the words of the agents echoing in my head. Not with my mother's message still glowing in memory. Stay gone. I typed Ethan Carter's name into search again. This time, I went deeper. Headlines filled the screen. Carter Ranch linked to land grabs in Wyoming. Federal whistleblower vanishes after naming Carter Associates. Missing heir may hold key to forged property deeds. And then I froze. One grainy photo from a local paper, taken nearly 20 years ago. My father stood in a church parking lot, hand extended in a shake. The man gripping his hand, smiling faintly, eyes sharp, was Ethan Carter. My stomach dropped. I remembered that photo. It used to hang in our hallway, but my parents never said his name. They only called it the big day, the day a deal closed, the day our family's fortune turned. But now I saw it for what it was, not a victory, a transaction. My parents hadn't worked weekends and prayed their way into stability. They'd taken money. They'd built our home on silence. My hands shook as I shut the laptop. I looked across the room at my children, asleep on the bed. All my life, my parents had told me I was weak, too soft, a disappointment. But what if the shame wasn't mine? What if it was theirs? I pressed my palms to my face, forcing back tears. The man bleeding on my porch wasn't just a stranger. He was the key to every lie my parents had ever told. And now, whether I wanted it or not, I was in the middle of it. The motel room hummed with the weak buzz of the heater. I sat awake as the sky lightened. At 6 a.m., I poured lukewarm water into a styrofoam cup of instant coffee and stood by the window. Frost clung to the glass, veins of ice spreading like cracks in old paint. The unknown message still haunted me. Liability or asset? I whispered to myself, so quiet even the kids couldn't hear. If they think I'll be a liability, then they're wrong. I clenched the cup in both hands, the resolve solidifying inside me. I'll be a weapon. The motel walls felt like they were closing in. By mid-morning, the kids were coloring on scraps of paper I'd found near the front desk, while I sat at the desk staring at the screen of my phone. Every article I read about Ethan Carter made my chest tighten. Fraud, bribery, missing persons, land seizures, and threaded through it all, small-town deals in Montana, backdated contracts, forged signatures. I reached for the old shoebox I'd carried since leaving Dallas. It held birth certificates, my husband's letters, and a deed to a tiny patch of land he once bought us, a garden that never happened. As I sifted through the papers, my hand froze. One document bore my name, a property transfer from 2005, supposedly signed by me. But I hadn't lived in Montana then. I was in Colorado in college. The signature was mine, yet not mine. Slanted, rushed, like someone had practiced until they could mimic it. The room spun. My parents hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, they'd used me. I whispered aloud, though the kids couldn't hear. I wasn't a stray. I was a pawn. That evening, a knock rattled the motel door. I jumped, heart pounding. Emily whispered, "Mom." I peeked through the curtain. Not agents, not my parents. Ethan Carter. He leaned against the railing, pale and unsteady, but alive. Bandages wrapped his head and exhaustion hung heavy in his eyes. I cracked the door. "What are you doing here?" "You should be in the hospital." His voice was rough, each word strained. "I had to find you. I need to tell you everything." I hesitated, glancing at my kids. His gaze softened. "I'm not here to hurt you. But if you don't hear me out, you'll never understand what you're caught in." Something in me wanted to slam the door. Another part, the part that had always wanted answers, led him inside. He lowered himself into a chair, every movement stiff. His eyes flicked to the papers on the desk, the document with my forged signature lying on top. He sighed. "So you've seen it." I crossed my arms. "Start talking." He leaned back, wincing slightly. "I worked for one of the big land firms. At first, I thought we were helping small towns develop, but we weren't building. We were stealing." My stomach tightened. They'd target families in crisis, old folks dying, kids barely 18, people who didn't understand what they were signing. They'd slide papers across the table, insurance forms, routine documents, that's what they said. but buried in the fine print, transfers, deeds, whole acres gone with a pen stroke. I thought of my parents, of my mother handing me forms at a summer barbecue. "Just sign, sweetheart." "It's nothing." Ethan's voice lowered. "Your name showed up again and again. Clean, untouched. You were perfect. They used your trust to rubber stamp deals. Your parents were a channel. One of the most reliable." My throat tightened until words barely escaped. "You're saying my parents built everything we had, our home, our security, on forged signatures. On mine," he didn't soften it. "Yes." I pressed a hand to my mouth, the bile rising. "Why are you telling me this?" His eyes met mine, not with pity, but with weary honesty. "Because I tried to stop it. I leaked documents, testimonies, files. They found out. That's why I vanished. That's why I was bleeding on your porch. I remembered your name. And I thought, if anyone could burn it all down, it'd be you." I turned away, staring at my children curled together on the bed. Their world was small, innocent, and here I was holding a truth that could tear generations apart. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, voice raw. "You shouldn't," he said simply, "but I'm not asking for trust. I'm offering the truth. Do what you want with it." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the heater rattling in the corner. Finally, I sat opposite him, staring at the map of stolen lands he'd unfolded on the desk. Names scrawled in pen, families displaced, and my name, forged over and over. "If what you're saying is true," I whispered, "then I'll need your help." His eyes softened, just a fraction. "You're not the only one they wronged." That night, after the kids had drifted into sleep, I stared at the ceiling of the motel room, my mind a whirlwind. My parents had built their fortune not on faith or hard work, but on lies and on my silence. I thought of my mother's message, "Stay gone." For the first time, I understood why. It wasn't rejection, it was fear. She knew the truth was crawling back into the light. I rolled over, pulled a notepad from the nightstand, and scribbled a single line at the top of the page, "End this for good." The storm outside howled through the night, but inside me, a colder storm had already begun. The motel room felt like a pressure cooker, every hour tighter than the last. I couldn't stop staring at the forged signature, my name scrawled across land deeds I never touched. Ethan slept in the armchair, his breathing ragged, while my children shifted restlessly on the bed. By morning, I knew one thing. I couldn't carry this truth alone. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't touched in years, my mother's. My finger hovered, then pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Marianne. Her voice was smooth, almost calm, like she'd been expecting me. "We need to talk." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Where are you?" I didn't answer. "Meet me?" Alone. We chose the park on the edge of town. The snow had been cleared from the paths, but the benches were frosted white. I spotted her near the gazebo, bundled in her wool coat, a scarf pulled high around her neck. She clutched a dented thermos, the same kind she used to bring to my soccer games when I was 11. For a moment, the sight of her almost cracked me. Almost. I stopped a few feet away. "Why did you do it?" Her shoulders sagged. She set the thermos on the bench, steam curling from the lid. "He used you, Marianne." "Your father." I knew, and I didn't stop him. The words cut deeper than I expected. I clenched my fists. "You watched him forge my name. You watched him steal, and you stayed silent." She lowered her eyes. I was afraid. He told me if I spoke, I'd lose everything. No money, no security. He said he'd make sure the blame fell on me. I laughed bitterly. "So you called me the stray." The disappointment. "You threw me and my children into the snow just to cover your fear." Her lips trembled. I was ashamed. "Every time I looked at you, I saw the life we should have lived, honest, clean, and I hated myself for not fighting harder. So I turned that hate on you. I stepped back, the frost crunching under my boots. Do you even hear yourself? You didn't just let it happen. You helped him bury it, and you buried me with it. Tears finally welled in her eyes, though she fought them. Marianne, he's getting ready to run. He's moving money offshore, closing accounts. He'll vanish before this explodes, and if I don't act, he'll leave me to take the fall. I stared at her, seeing not the polished woman who had ruled my childhood with iron and ice, but someone smaller, cornered. And now you want my help? She nodded, desperation flickering. You're the only one who can stop him. The silence stretched. A crow called in the distance, harsh and lonely. Finally I spoke. You want my help? Then you testify, on record. You tell the truth about everything. And until then, stay away from my kids. Her face crumpled. Marianne, please. No more please. This is the deal. You testify or you're part of his crimes. She looked at me with the softest grief I'd ever seen in her. Her voice broke. You were never the stray. You were the only one in this family with a soul I turned away, my throat raw. Then prove it. Back at the motel, Ethan was waiting. He raised an eyebrow as I came in, snow still clinging to my coat. You met her. I nodded, setting the thermos on the table. She admitted it. She knew. She's scared he'll pin it all on her. Ethan leaned forward. She'll flip if she thinks it saves her. She doesn't get to flip, I said sharply. She gets to testify. For the first time since I met him, Ethan smiled, not with joy, but with recognition. You're ready to fight. I sat at the desk, pulled out the notebook I'd bought at a gas station, and began to write names, dates, steps. At the top, I scrawled, to do 1, get mom's statement. 2, file everything with a lawyer. 3, protect the kids. 4, protect Ethan. 5, end this for good. The heater hummed. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world blanketed in white. But inside me, the storm only grew stronger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my parents anymore. That night, as my children slept, I sat awake on the couch, pen still in hand. Ethan slept in the chair, one hand resting on his bandages, the other hanging loose. The past replayed in fragments, my father's voice low and secretive saying, if it ever goes south, I go to Denver. A locked drawer in his study, my mother's face when she confessed, all of it pointed in one direction. I didn't just have to fight back, I had to uncover everything. The truth had been buried for decades, but it was time to dig. By dawn, I was done hiding. The notebook lay open on the motel desk, pages covered with messy handwriting, names I remembered from overheard conversations, addresses scribbled on envelopes in my father's study, bank names muttered when he thought I wasn't listening. Every detail that had seemed meaningless before now glowed with sinister weight. Ethan stirred in the chair, groaning softly as he shifted. His face was pale, but his eyes opened with surprising clarity. You've been up all night. I nodded. I'm done being in the dark. If I'm going to fight them, I need someone who knows the system, someone who can make this real. His gaze held mine. Do you trust anyone? The question stung. I thought about it. Then one name surfaced. There's a lawyer in Billings. Sarah Jensen. She helped me after my husband's accident. She was the only one who treated me like a person, not a burden. Ethan leaned back, wincing. Then call her. Before your father makes his move, I left the kids with Ethan at the motel, bribing them with coloring books from the gas station next door. My chest tightened as I drove into Billings alone, but I knew I couldn't delay. Sarah's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, the kind with creaky stairs and windows that let in more cold than light. She looked up from behind a stack of files as I walked in, her blonde hair pulled back, glasses perched low. Marianne Clark, she said, surprise flashing across her face. What brings you here? I didn't bother with pleasantries. I placed the forged deed on her desk. My name stared up at us both. I need help. And I need to move fast. Her eyes scanned the page. Then she reached into her drawer and pulled out a magnifier. "You didn't sign this." "No." My voice trembled, then steadied. "But my parents did. And they've been using my name for years." She looked at me, sharp and steady. "This isn't just forgery. It's organized fraud. If the Carters are involved, we're talking federal." I exhaled, almost laughing. "Federal's already at the hospital. Agents, badges. They warned me to keep quiet." Her brows rose. "That means someone's scared of what you know." "Good. That gives us leverage." Sarah leaned forward, her voice low. "We need records. Bank statements, contracts, anything that ties your parents to the Carters. If you can get me proof, I can take it to the U.S. Attorney's Office." The weight of her words pressed on me. Proof. Evidence. Not just my voice, not just Ethan's. Paper that couldn't be denied. I nodded slowly. "I know where to look." That night, back at the motel, I sat across from Ethan with a pile of old keys in my hand. They jingled softly like ghosts of another life. My father's study. He kept a locked drawer. I haven't been in that room in years, but I still have the spare key. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're going back?" "Yes." He shook his head. "It's too dangerous." "If he catches you," I cut him off, "then I finally stop running." Silence stretched, broken only by the heater's rattle. Finally, he nodded. "Then I'm going with you." I almost argued, but then I saw the fire in his eyes. For all his injuries, he wasn't broken. Not yet. 2 nights later, we drove back to the farmhouse. The kids stayed with Sarah in Billings, safe for the first time in weeks. My stomach twisted as the familiar silhouette of the house rose against the night sky, porch light glowing faintly. We crept inside through the mudroom door. The house smelled the same, cedar polish and stale smoke. My chest tightened. Memories pressed close, but I forced them down. The study door loomed at the end of the hall. I slid the key into the lock, my hand trembling. The click echoed like a gunshot. Inside, the room was exactly as I remembered. Shelves lined with dusty books, maps pinned to corkboards, and the massive oak desk that had once seemed so impressive. Ethan closed the door behind us. "Where's the drawer?" I knelt by the desk, fingers fumbling at the brass handle. Another key, another click. The drawer slid open. Stacks of manila folders, contracts, bank slips, receipts. My breath caught. Ethan lifted one file, scanning quickly. His eyes widened. "This is it. Transfers, property deeds. And look, your signature." Over and over, I flipped through another. Dates stretched back 20 years. Family names I recognized. People who had lost everything. My hand shook as I shoved the papers into my bag. "We need to get this to Sarah." But then a voice froze me in place. "And where do you think you're going with my files?" I spun. My father stood in the doorway, gun in hand, eyes colder than I'd ever seen. For a moment, the air refused to move. Ethan stiffened beside me, every muscle tensed. I clutched the bag to my chest, heart hammering. My father's voice was low, steady. "You should have stayed gone, Marianne. Now you've left me no choice." My father stood in the doorway, the pistol steady in his hand. His eyes, once the eyes that had taught me to ride a bike, to cast a fishing line, were colder than the steel he held. "Put the files back, Marianne," he said, calm, almost gentle. "Walk away, and I'll forget you were here." My chest tightened. I clutched the bag of evidence to me. "You forged my name. You built our family on lies. I won't walk away." His jaw twitched. "I did what I had to." "Do you think the world rewards honesty?" My father's eyes flicked to him, sharp with contempt. "You Carters were always parasites. Using my daughter as your pawn doesn't change that." Rage surged through me. No one used me. Not anymore. You used me, Dad. You stole my name, my trust, my soul, and now I'm taking it back for a moment. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Then it hardened. His finger tightened on the trigger. I stepped forward, heart pounding. If you kill me, these papers still live. I made copies. I told people, you can't bury this anymore. A lie, but one he couldn't risk. His hand trembled. Just slightly. Ethan's voice cut through the silence, low and firm. You're done, Clark. Walk away or face the law. Either way, this ends tonight. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly my father lowered the gun. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of 20 years had finally broken him. You were always too much like your mother, he muttered, voice hollow, soft. Dangerous, I swallowed hard. No, Dad, I was what you should have been. I pushed past him, the bag clutched to my chest. He didn't stop me, didn't speak. He just stood there, a shadow of the man I'd once called a hero. As Ethan and I stepped into the cold night, the weight of the files in my arms felt heavier than stone, but for the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone. The storm inside me had reached its peak, and now, at last, it was breaking. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. A month had passed since that night in my father's study, but the memory of him lowering the gun still haunted me. Now he sat at the defense table in a gray suit that suddenly looked too big for him, flanked by attorneys who whispered constantly. My mother sat on the opposite side, pale but steady. For the first time in my life, I saw her, not as the flawless figure of my childhood, but as a woman who had chosen survival over truth. Today, survival meant testifying against her husband. I sat in the gallery, Ethan beside me, bandages gone, but scars still faintly visible. My children fidgeted quietly, coloring in books Sarah had given them to keep them calm. When the judge entered, the room rose. My father didn't look at me. Not once. The prosecution laid out the evidence: forged deeds, fraudulent transfers, bank accounts in my father's name and others he had manipulated. My own signature appeared again and again on the screen, projected for everyone to see. Each time it flashed, shame burned through me. But then I would feel David's small hand slip into mine or see Emily leaning against my shoulder, and the shame would fade into something stronger: resolve. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom hushed. I told them about the night of the storm, about the years of silence, the papers pushed under my hand without explanation, the way my parents had dismissed my questions. I told them how I found Ethan on the porch, bleeding and broken, and how that moment forced me to see what had always been hidden. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Finally, the prosecutor asked, "Why did you come forward, Mrs. Clark?" I looked at my children, then at my parents, one hollow, one ashamed. "Because lies can build a house," I said quietly, "but they can't make a home. My children deserve better than silence, and I deserve better than fear." The verdict came 2 days later: guilty, fraud, conspiracy, forgery. My father was led away in handcuffs, his head bowed. My mother avoided my eyes, but as she walked past, she slipped a folded note into my hand. I didn't open it until that night when the kids were asleep. It said only, "I'm sorry. You were always right. Love, Mom." The tears came then, hot and unrelenting. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily, maybe not at all. But the note stayed in my wallet, proof that even the coldest walls can crack. Months later, life found a new rhythm. We rented a small house on the edge of Billings, nothing fancy, but it had a yard where David and Emily could run barefoot in the grass. We planted tomatoes and herbs in old buckets, and for the first time, laughter filled our evenings. Ethan stayed close. His recovery was slow, but his determination didn't falter. Together, we started working with Sarah to build a community trust, helping families who had lost their land to fraud reclaim what was rightfully theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Emily tugged my hand. "Mom, is this home now?" I looked around. The tiny kitchen with mismatched plates, the children's drawings taped to the fridge, Ethan hammering together a chicken coop in the yard. "Yes," I whispered, pulling her close. "This is home." Sometimes when the night grows quiet, I still think of my parents' farmhouse, of the door that closed in my face, of the storm that drove me out. But then I remember what followed, the truth unearthed, the strength I never knew I had, the life my children and I built with our own hands. I lost a family that winter, but in losing it, I found something far greater. I found freedom, I found peace, and I found the courage to never look away again. And that's where Marianne's journey leaves us. From the cold rejection on her parents' porch, through the storm of secrets and betrayal, to standing tall in a courtroom, she proved that even the deepest wounds can lead to strength. She lost the family she thought she needed, but built the home her children truly deserved. If there's one lesson in her story, it's this: we are never defined by the lies of others, but by the courage to choose truth. And when we choose truth, we choose freedom. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, your love, your truth, your place are always worth defending.